The emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in cold white. The man finally looked at her. Gray eyes, sharp as winter. His gaze moved from her face to the duffel bag, to her worn sneakers, to the way her knuckles were bone white around the strap. First time trapped in an elevator? His voice was low, controlled. Chicago accent, South Side edges smoothed out but not erased. Veronica nodded. Didn't trust her voice yet. He pulled out his phone, frowned at the no-service display, then pocketed it again. They'll have us out in an hour, maybe less. He loosened his tie, black silk, expensive, and leaned against the opposite wall. Could be worse, could be August. She almost laughed. Almost. But laughter felt like a luxury she'd lost somewhere between the bus station and this moment. And now the emergency phone was ringing unanswered, and the walls were definitely closer than they'd been 60 seconds ago. You okay? The man's voice cut through the white noise in her head. I'm fine. You're not. He said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. Your breathing's off. You keep looking at the door like you're expecting someone to break through it. Veronica's jaw tightened. I said I'm fine. He studied her for another moment, then shrugged and pulled out his phone again. No service, but he scrolled through something anyway. Messages, maybe, or emails that wouldn't send until the world started working again. She watched him from the corner of her eye. Mid to late 30s, she guessed. Strong jaw, dark hair styled carefully but not obsessively. The kind of man who looked dangerous even when standing completely still. Adam was dangerous too, but in a different way. Adam was a prosecutor who'd memorized every law he could weaponize, who showed up at her apartment with police escorts when she stopped returning his calls, who told her crying was emotional manipulation, and that loving him was the only rational choice. This man didn't look rational. He looked like consequence. 20 minutes passed in silence. Veronica slid down to sit on the floor, duffel bag in her lap, counting her breaths the way her therapist taught her before she'd had to stop going because Adam monitored her insurance claims. The man stayed standing, checking his watch occasionally, expression unreadable. Then her phone rang. She grabbed it from her pocket, saw the name, and felt her stomach drop into her shoes. Adam Hargrove, missed calls, 23. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail, then immediately started ringing again. You should answer that, the man said quietly. I really shouldn't. Ex-boyfriend? She looked up sharply. He was watching her again, but not the way Adam watched. Not possessive, not calculating. Just observant. Ex-fiancé, she corrected. And he's not really the ex part yet, not in his mind. The phone rang again. Adam's face filled the screen. Professional headshot, American flag in the background, that practice smile. She declined the call. Her hands were shaking. How long have you been running? Veronica shouldn't answer, shouldn't tell this stranger anything. But the elevator was so quiet, and the world outside felt so far away, and maybe it didn't matter anymore because Adam would find her eventually. He always did. 3 weeks since I left, 3 months since I knew I had to. The man nodded slowly. He know you're in Chicago? Not yet. He thinks I'm in Portland. I bought a bus ticket, there with my credit card yesterday, then paid cash for the one here. She pulled her knees to her chest. It'll buy me maybe 2 days before he figures it out. And then I disappear again, find another city, another hotel, another... Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, forced it steady. Another temporary fix until he finds me again. The man was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved, sliding down the wall to sit across from her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely between them. Up close, she could see the calluses on his knuckles, the fine scar along his jaw. the way his suit jacket hung perfectly on shoulders that suggested he knew his way around a gym. "What's your name?" he asked. Veronica Chen." "Brian." He didn't offer a last name. "What did you do before you started running?" "I'm a pastry chef. Was. I owned a bakery in Boston. Sweet Endings." She smiled bitterly. Ironic, right? Specialized in wedding cakes. Adam proposed at the shop, actually. Grand gesture. Roses, photographer, his entire office staff as witnesses. I said yes because saying no in front of 40 people felt impossible. Brian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. "You gave up your business to run from him?" "I gave up everything. The shop, my apartment, my savings account. He had access to it. Said couples should be financially transparent. My car was in his name because he said it was more practical, for insurance. I left with $2,000 in cash I'd been hiding in a flour container and whatever fit in this bag." She gestured to the duffel. 3 days' worth of clothes, my grandmother's recipe book, and a lot of regret. The elevator groaned. They both tensed, but nothing happened. The lights flickered once, then held steady. Brian leaned his head back against the wall. He's not going to stop. It wasn't a question. Veronica felt something cold settle in her chest. No, he's not. Adam doesn't lose. Not cases, not arguments, not people he decides belong to him. She picked at a loose thread on her jeans. He once spent 6 months prosecuting a guy who cut him off in traffic. Found an outstanding warrant from 15 years ago, had him extradited from Nevada. The guy spent 8 months in jail waiting for trial. Adam dropped the charges the day I agreed to move in with him. Brian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's not love. I know that now. Veronica's laugh was hollow. Took me 2 years to figure it out. My friends tried to tell me. My mom tried. But Adam was so convincing. He'd show up with my favorite flowers after I hadn't mentioned them in months. He'd happen to be wherever I was. He made me feel seen. Special. Until I realized he wasn't paying attention. He was surveillance. Her phone buzzed. Text message. Adam. Veronica, this is childish. I've already filed a missing persons report. The police are looking for you. Come home before you make this worse. Adam. I know about the Portland ticket. I also know you withdrew cash at South Station. You're not as clever as you think you are. Adam. I'm trying to be patient. Don't test me. Brian's eyes flicked to the screen, reading the messages upside down. His expression remained neutral, but his hands closed into fists. He's bluffing about the missing persons report, Brian said calmly. You're an adult who left voluntarily. No crime committed. He's hoping fear will bring you back. How do you know? Because men like him rely on psychology more than force. Control is about making you believe you have no options. He paused. You have options, Veronica. Like what? Keep running forever? He's already tracking my credit cards. He probably called every hotel in Chicago by now, asking if a woman matching my description checked in alone. Brian tilted his head slightly. Did you? Check in alone? She nodded. Room 1842. Paid for 3 nights cash. Gave a fake name. Smart. He checked his watch again. 12:34 a.m. New Year. Through the elevator's ceiling, they could hear distant cheering from the hotel's rooftop party. Champagne corks, music, people celebrating fresh starts they'd abandoned by February. Veronica closed her eyes. When she opened them, Brian was still watching her with that unreadable expression. Can I ask you something? She said. You can ask. Why aren't you freaking out? We've been stuck here for almost an hour. Most people would be, I don't know, anxious, angry. You're just sitting there. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. I've been in worse places. Like where? Smaller boxes, with less friendly company. She wanted to ask what that meant, but something in his tone suggested the conversation was closed. Instead, she said, "What do you do?" "For work. I solve problems." "That's vague." "It's accurate." He stood, reached up, and pressed the emergency call button again. This time, someone answered. "Hotel. Maintenance. Sorry for the delay. We're working on it. You'll be out in approximately 20 minutes. "Appreciated," Brian said, and let the button go. 20 minutes. Veronica pulled out her phone again, scrolled past 17 more texts from Adam. The last one made her blood ice over. Adam. "I'm at O'Hare. See you soon, sweetheart." Her hand started trembling so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Brian crouched in front of her, not touching, just present. "What is it?" "He's here. He's in Chicago." Her voice came out strangled. "How did he? Doesn't matter how. What matters is what you do next." Brian's voice was steady, grounding. "You have 3 options. 1. Run again. Hope he doesn't catch up before you hit the next city. 2. Go to the police. File a restraining order. Hope the system protects you. He is the system. Half the cops in Boston owe him favors. Then 3. Brian held her gaze. "You let someone scarier than him make it clear you're off limits." Veronica stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means," Brian said carefully, "that I can make your ex-fiancé understand that pursuing you further would be extremely unwise. But it requires you to trust me for approximately 6 months. 6 months? I have a situation that requires a public relationship. Someone who can attend events, smile for cameras, convince certain people that I'm settled, domestic, harmless." His mouth twisted on the last word. "In exchange, you get a place to stay, a new identity, and the kind of protection that makes prosecutors with hero complexes reconsider their life choices." The elevator suddenly lurched back to life. "Wait!" Veronica grabbed his arm without thinking. "You're serious? This isn't... You're not joking?" The doors opened on the 19th floor. Brian stood, straightened his jacket, and offered his hand to help her up. She took it. His grip was warm, solid, completely controlled. "I don't joke about business arrangements, Veronica. You need protection. I need..." He paused, choosing words carefully. "A convincing performance. We help each other. 6 months. Then you're free to disappear properly with enough money to start over somewhere he'll never find you. And if I say no, then you walk out this door, and I forget we had this conversation." He held her gaze. "But your ex lands in 90 minutes, and hotel security won't stop a prosecutor with a badge and a sob story. So decide quickly." Veronica looked down at her phone. Adam had sent a photo, his boarding pass. "Flight 2847, arriving ORD 2:15 a.m. She looked back at Brian, this stranger with gray eyes and secrets in his smile, who'd sat with her in a broken elevator like it was the most natural thing in the world. "What kind of situation needs a fake girlfriend?" "The kind," Brian said quietly, "where people are trying very hard to make me look weak. And a man with a family, even a manufactured one, looks significantly less vulnerable than a man alone." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving tonight." He stepped out of the elevator, held the door. "So, yes or no, Veronica Chen who makes wedding cakes for other people's happy endings. Do we make a deal?" Behind them, the elevator chimed, ready to close. Veronica thought about Adam waiting at the airport, about the restraining order that wouldn't hold, about running until her legs gave out and her money ran dry, and she ended up back in that apartment in Boston, back in that life, back in that cage. She thought about Brian's hands, strong enough to hurt, gentle enough to wait. She stepped out of the elevator. 6 months, she said. And you keep him away from me, completely away. Brian smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face. 6 months. And Veronica? He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. Adam Hargrove will never touch you again. That's a promise. The elevator doors closed behind them with a quiet whisper. And somewhere in the night, a plane carrying a man who'd never learned to let go descended toward Chicago, unaware that the woman he was hunting had just allied herself with something far more dangerous than fear. Brian DeLuca didn't make empty promises, and the men who knew his name understood exactly what that meant. The penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of the building on East Lakeshore Drive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan, the water black and restless under the 2 a.m. sky. Inside, everything was warm, hardwood, leather, the kind of silence that money bought when it paid for thick walls and neighbors who minded their business. Veronica stood in the entryway, duffel bag still clutched in her hand, and tried not to feel like she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Brian shrugged out of his jacket, hung it in a closet that probably cost more than her entire bakery's equipment. Guest rooms down the hall, second door on the left. Private bathroom. I'll have clothes brought over tomorrow. Your size? 6. Medium tops, but You can't wear the same 3 outfits for 6 months. He loosened his tie completely, pulled it off. This arrangement only works if you look like you belong here. That means wardrobe, hair appointments, anything else you need. It's not charity. It's logistics. Veronica set her bag down carefully. The marble floor was so polished she could see her reflection. Exhausted eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun. The old Boston College sweatshirt she'd been wearing for 36 hours straight. She looked like exactly what she was. A woman who'd been running so long she'd forgotten what stillness felt like. I should clarify something, she said. When you said public relationship, I meant public. Dinners, charity events, occasional photos. Nothing private happens that you don't agree to. Brian walked to the kitchen. Open concept, marble counters, espresso machine that looked like it belonged in a museum. Coffee? It's 2 a.m. That's not a no. He started the machine anyway, movements efficient and practiced. You should know what you've agreed to. I have business obligations that require a certain image. Dinners with associates who need to believe I'm stable. Charity galas where appearing alone raises questions about loyalty, commitment, weakness. In my world, perception is currency. What world is that exactly? Brian pulled 2 cups from a cabinet. One where I solve problems other people can't, where I have friends in low places and enemies in high ones, where your ex-prosecutor fiancé is a minor inconvenience, not a threat. He poured espresso into both cups, slid one across the counter to her. You want specifics, you'll be disappointed. What you need to know is that when you're with me, you're untouchable. Adam Hargrove could have the entire Boston Police Department at his back and it wouldn't matter. Veronica picked up the cup. The ceramic was warm, against her palms. You're Mafia. It wasn't a question. Brian's slight smile confirmed it anyway. I prefer independently affiliated entrepreneur, but yes, 3rd generation. My grandfather came over from Sicily in 1952. Built the DeLuca family into something respectable. Or respectable enough, depending who you ask. He sipped his espresso, watching her over the rim. Does that change your mind? It should. Veronica knew it should. She'd spent 3 months running from one dangerous man. Common sense said, don't walk straight into the arms of another. But Adam was dangerous in a way that followed rules, that weaponized the law, that hid behind badges in courtrooms. He was dangerous because the system protected him. Brian was dangerous because the system couldn't touch him. No, she said. It doesn't change my mind. Good. He set his cup down. Then we should establish ground rules. 1. You don't ask about my work. You don't want those answers, and I won't give them. 2. When we're in public, you follow my lead. I'll brief you before every event. Who's who, what to say, what not to say. Your job is to be charming and appropriately affectionate. Define appropriately affectionate. Hand-holding. Occasional kiss on the cheek. You lean into me when we're standing together. You laugh at my jokes even when they're not funny. His mouth quirked. Especially when they're not funny. We're selling a story. You're the woman who made me want to settle down. I'm the man you trust completely. Nobody questions it. Veronica wrapped both hands around her cup. And when we're alone? These walls, your space, my space. We're business partners, not prisoners. You want to lock your bedroom door, lock it. You want to leave during the day, you're free to go. But you text me first so I know you're safe. Adam shows up anywhere near you. You call me immediately. He paused. That's rule 3. Your safety is non-negotiable. You take risks, the deal's off. Fair. She took a sip of the espresso. It was perfect. Dark, smooth, exactly the right amount of bitter. Like everything else in this place, it was uncomfortably perfect. What about you? Any rules for me? Brian considered that. Don't pity me. What? You're going to learn things, see things. There's a room in this apartment I keep locked, photos I don't hang, conversations I don't have. When you figure out why, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Don't pity me. I've made my choices. I live with them. Veronica studied him. Really studied him for the first time since the elevator. Under the expensive suit and controlled demeanor, there was something wounded. Something that flinched away from softness, the way she flinched from sudden movements. Deal, she said. No pity. But that goes both ways. Don't treat me like I'm broken. You're not broken. You're a woman who survived something that would have destroyed most people. He finished his espresso in one swallow. There's a difference. The compliment caught her off guard. Adam used to say she was damaged goods, that he was generous enough to overlook, that her anxiety was dramatic, her fear irrational, her need for space selfish. Brian said she survived, past tense, like it was already over. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded, then checked his watch. It's late. You should sleep. We have brunch tomorrow at 11. My Aunt Rosa. She's going to interrogate you like you're on trial. But if you win her over, the rest of the family falls in line. Tomorrow? Veronica's stomach dropped. That's not enough time to prepare? Yes, it is. I'll brief you over breakfast. He rinsed both cups, set them in the sink. Rosa's going to ask where we met, how long we've been seeing each other, what your intentions are. The story is, we met 6 weeks ago at a gallery opening in the Loop. You were catering desserts. I asked you to dinner. You said no 3 times before finally saying yes. We've been taking it slow because you're recently out of a bad relationship. That's actually true. Mostly. Best lies always are. Brian moved toward the hallway, then paused. Veronica, you made the right choice tonight. Adam might not believe it yet, but he will. He disappeared down the hallway before she could respond. A door opened, closed. Silence settled back over the penthouse like snow. Veronica stood alone in the kitchen, holding an empty espresso cup, staring at the city lights reflected in the lake 42 stories below. Somewhere out there, Adam was landing, checking his phone, realizing she wasn't answering, making calls, pulling strings, doing what he did best, hunting. But for the first time in 3 months, she wasn't afraid. Or maybe she was just too exhausted to feel it anymore. She found the guest room exactly where Brian said it would be. The bed was enormous, covered in soft gray linens. The bathroom had heated floors and a rainfall shower and towels so thick they felt like clouds. She locked the door, tested it twice, then fell onto the bed fully clothed. Her phone buzzed. Adam. Landed. Where are you? Adam. Veronica. Answer me. Adam. The hotel said you checked out. Very cute. This ends now. She turned the phone off completely, shoved it under a pillow, and for the first time in years, Veronica Chen slept through the night without waking once. And the smell of coffee and something sweet pulled her awake at 9 a.m. Veronica blinked at the ceiling. White, smooth, unfamiliar, and for 3 seconds couldn't remember where she was. Then it crashed back. The elevator. Brian. The deal. She sat up slowly, muscles stiff from more than just one night's sleep. Her duffel bag sat on the chair by the window, exactly where she'd left it. For a moment she just stared at it, at her entire life compressed into 40 pounds of fabric and regret. Then she stood up, unlocked the door, and followed the smell of breakfast. Brian was in the kitchen, dressed casually in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her rent used to. He had reading glasses perched on his nose, scrolling through a tablet while something sizzled on the stove. You cook? Veronica said from the doorway. He glanced up. I make breakfast. There's a difference. Coffee's fresh and I didn't know what you liked, so I made everything. He gestured to the counter. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, fresh fruit, cut into perfect pieces, and, her breath caught, croissants from Pierrot Gourmet, the French bakery she'd been dying to try when she lived in Boston, but never had time. You went out? She asked. I sent someone. Sit. Eat. We have an hour before we need to leave. Veronica slid onto one of the bar stools. The food was still warm. She picked up a croissant, pulled it apart slowly. Layers of butter and flour separated like delicate paper. She took a bite and closed her eyes. Perfect. When she opened them, Brian was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. What? She said. Nothing. Just, you look like you're tasting something holy. I'm a pastry chef. This is holy. She took another bite. Whoever made this knew exactly what they were doing. The lamination is perfect. The butter content is at least 60%. The oven temp was probably 450, dropped to 425 halfway through. She stared at him. How do you know that? Brian shrugged, went back to his tablet. I pay attention. They ate in comfortable silence. Veronica demolished the croissant, moved on to eggs and bacon, let herself actually feel hungry for the first time in weeks. Across from her, Brian scrolled through news. Local headlines, stock reports, something in Italian she couldn't read upside down. Question, she said finally. Answer. This brunch with your aunt, what's the real reason you need me to convince her? Brian set the tablet down, removed his glasses. Without them, his face looked harder. Rosa raised me. My mother died when I was 7. Ovarian cancer. My father wasn't equipped for single parenthood. He was good at business, bad at everything else. So Rosa stepped in. She's the family matriarch. She approves of you. Everyone else will fall in line. She doesn't... He paused. The deal falls apart before it starts. She wants to see you settled. She wants to see me safe. In her mind, a man without family is vulnerable. And vulnerable men in this business don't last long. Veronica turned her coffee cup slowly. Is she right? Probably. He stood, cleared both their plates. There's a box in your room. Dress for brunch. Nothing too formal, but Chicago in January means layers. We leave at 10:30. Brian? He turned at the sink. Your mother. Veronica said carefully. What was her name? Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or memory so old it had calcified into something harder. Juliana. Everyone called her Julie. He turned the water. On started rinsing dishes. She made the best tiramisu I've ever had. Used to let me help her layer the mascarpone. I'd eat half of it before it made it to the fridge. Veronica smiled. My grandmother taught me to make pineapple buns when I was 6. Same problem. Never made it to the oven. Then you understand. Brian shut off the water, dried his hands on a towel. Food is memory, and some memories are worth keeping. He left before she could respond. Veronica sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of breakfast and the kind of silence that felt less empty than thoughtful. She thought about mothers who died too soon, grandmothers who taught survival through recipes, and men who hid their grief behind perfectly pressed suits. She thought about Adam, who'd never once asked about her grandmother's pineapple buns. And she thought, maybe this arrangement wouldn't be as simple as 6 months and goodbye. Maybe nothing about Brian DeLuca was simple at all. Rosa DeLuca's house in Bridgeport smelled like Sunday. Garlic, tomato sauce, bread baking, the kind of scent that clung to clothes and made you hungry even after eating. The dining room table could seat 14, but today it was just the 4 of them. Rosa at the head, Brian to her right, Veronica to her left, and Rosa's husband Marco at the far end, reading a newspaper in silence. Rosa herself was small, maybe 5'2", with steel gray hair pulled into a bun and eyes that missed nothing. She'd hugged Veronica at the door, hard, like they'd known each other for years, then immediately started critiquing Brian's appearance. You look thin. You eating? Veronica, is he eating? I'm eating, Zia. Brian accepted the critique with the patience of someone who'd endured it 1,000 times. Not enough. Look at your face. Too much work. Not enough rest. Rosa turned to Veronica, switched to rapid-fire interrogation. So, Brian says you're a baker. Pastry chef, Veronica corrected gently. I had my own shop in Boston, specialized in wedding cakes and French pastries. Had? Rosa's eyes sharpened. Not anymore? I had to close it. Personal reasons. Rosa studied her for a long moment. Veronica kept her expression neutral, the way she'd practiced in the mirror that morning while getting dressed. The box Brian mentioned had contained 4 different outfits, all in her exact size, all tasteful and expensive. She'd chosen gray wool pants, a cream cashmere sweater, and a coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. She looked like she belonged in Brian's world. She felt like an imposter. Personal reasons, Rosa repeated. That's code for man trouble. Brian shifted slightly. Zia. What? She's a beautiful woman, runs her own business, suddenly closes it and moves to Chicago. She's running from something. Or someone. Rosa reached across the table, patted Veronica's hand. It's okay, Kara. We've all run from something. The question is, did you run toward Brian? Or just away from whatever scared you? Veronica glanced at Brian. He gave her the smallest nod. Truth, but careful. Both, Veronica said. I was in a relationship that became difficult, controlling. When I tried to leave, he made it clear he wouldn't accept that. So I left anyway. Came to Chicago. Met Brian a few weeks later. Gallery opening, Rosa said. He told me. You were catering desserts. He asked you to dinner. You said no 3 times. Very smart. Men who get everything easy don't value it. That's surprisingly accurate. Rosa smiled. It transformed her face, made her look younger. I've been married 47 years, Kara. I know men. They're simple creatures. Feed them, challenge them, Love them in that order. Brian, go help Marco with the wine. I want to talk to Veronica alone. Brian hesitated. Zia, we agreed I'd meet her. I'm meeting her. Go. He stood slowly, squeezed Veronica's shoulder once. A silent, you've got this. Then disappeared, into the kitchen with Marco. The moment they were alone, Rosa's expression shifted. The warmth didn't disappear, but something sharper emerged underneath. He told you what he does, Rosa said. Not a question. He told me enough. And you're not afraid? Veronica met her eyes. I've spent 3 months being afraid of a man who used the law to control me. Brian's world might be different, but at least he's honest about what it is. Rosa leaned back, considering that. The man you ran from. Prosecutor, yes. Brian did some research. Adam Hargrove. 34, rising star, connected family. Dangerous in his own way. Veronica's chest tightened. You know about Adam? I know Brian doesn't make decisions lightly. He brings you here, introduces you to family. He's already decided you're worth protecting. What I need to know is, are you using him, or do you actually care? The question landed like a punch. Veronica set down her water glass carefully. I met your nephew 18 hours ago in a broken elevator. He offered me a deal. 6 months pretending to be his girlfriend in exchange for protection and a fresh start. I said yes because I was desperate and he was offering a way out. So yes, Rosa, I'm using him. That's the arrangement. Silence. Then Rosa started laughing. Deep, genuine, the kind that shook her shoulders. Oh, I like you. You don't lie pretty. You just tell the truth and dare people to accept it. She wiped her eyes. Good. Brian's been lied to enough for 3 lifetimes. He needs someone who won't. I don't understand. You will. Rosa stood, started pulling dishes from a cabinet. His mother, my sister Juliana, she died when Brian was 7. Ovarian cancer. Horrible, fast. Their father, Antonio, he fell apart. Started drinking, stopped parenting. Brian raised himself, or I raised him when Antonio allowed it, which wasn't often. When Brian was 19, Antonio died. Heart attack, but really it was grief. Left Brian everything. The business, the debts, the enemies. My nephew became a man overnight. He's been surviving ever since. Veronica listened, trying to reconcile the controlled, careful Brian she'd met with the image of a 19-year-old suddenly responsible for an empire. There's more, Rosa continued, setting plates on the table. Brian had a younger sister, Lucia. She was 4 when Juliana died. Social services tried to take her, said Antonio wasn't fit. Brian fought to keep her, but he was just a kid. Himself. They put Lucia in foster care. Brian swore he'd get her back. Did he? Rosa's expression crumbled for just a second. She died in the system, 10 years old. Pneumonia that went untreated because her foster family didn't think it was serious enough for a doctor. By the time Brian found out, it was too late. Veronica's throat closed. Oh, God. He doesn't talk about her. Hasn't been in her room since we cleaned it out 20 years ago. But he donates millions every year to children's charities, foster care reform, medical access programs. Anonymous, always. He saves kids he'll never meet because he couldn't save the one that mattered. Rosa's voice wavered. That's who you're making a deal with, Veronica. A man who protects people because he knows what it costs when nobody does. In the kitchen, Brian laughed at something Marco said. The sound was light, easy, completely at odds with the story Rosa just told. Why are you telling me this? Veronica asked. Because you need to understand. Brian will keep you safe. That's what he does. But if you hurt him, if you take his protection and give him nothing real in return, you'll answer to me. Not his soldiers, not his business partners. Me. Capiche? I'm not going to hurt him. You say that now, but 6 months is a long time. And my nephew. Rosa's voice softened. He's been alone so long. I don't think he remembers what it's like to have someone really see him. You do that, you give him that, and then you leave? That's a hurt that doesn't heal. Before Veronica could respond, Brian and Marco returned with wine. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Marco's garden, Rosa's plans for Easter, neighborhood gossip that meant nothing to Veronica but clearly mattered to them. She watched Brian through it all, noticing things she'd missed before. The way he touched Rosa's shoulder when passing her bread, the way he laughed at Marco's bad jokes, the way his whole body relaxed in this house in a way it didn't in the penthouse. This was home. Real home. And Veronica was an outsider performing for an audience of 2. After the meal, Rosa insisted on wrapping up leftovers for them to take back. Brian helped clear dishes while Veronica found herself alone with Marco on the back porch. The old man lit a cigar, offered her one. She declined. You're quieter than I expected, Marco said in a thick Italian accent. I'm still figuring everything out. Brian's a good boy. Man, I mean. He takes care of family. Marco exhaled smoke into the frigid January air. Rosa's worried he's too alone, that the business will eat him before he has a chance to live. You understand? I think so. Good. Then you understand. We're not asking you to love him. We're asking you to let him breathe for a few months. Pretend or not, doesn't matter. He needs to remember what normal feels like. Marco fixed her with a surprisingly sharp gaze. Can you do that? Veronica thought about Adam, who'd never let her breathe, who'd monitored her phone, her schedule, her thoughts, who'd loved her the way collectors love museum pieces, possessively, suffocatingly, from behind glass. Brian wasn't asking her to shrink. He was asking her to exist beside him. Yes, she said. I can do that. Marco nodded, satisfied. Then welcome to the family, Veronica, for however long you're here. They drove back to the city in comfortable silence. Brian navigated the icy streets with easy confidence, the SUV's heated seats, making Veronica drowsy. She watched the neighborhoods change, Bridgeport's brick row houses giving way to the Loop's steel and glass. Then the elegant lakefront towers where people like Brian lived 42 stories above everyone else. Rosa likes you, Brian said finally. How can you tell? She gave you her linguine recipe. That's approval. He glanced over. She also probably told you about Lucia. Veronica's breath caught. She did. And now you're wondering what you've gotten yourself into. Actually, I'm wondering why you didn't tell me yourself. Brian was quiet for a long moment. They pulled into the building's underground parking, the SUV's headlights cutting through concrete darkness. Because, he said, turning off the engine, telling you would have been asking for pity, and we agreed. No pity. Understanding isn't pity, Brian. He looked at her then. Really looked, the way he had in the elevator when she'd first told him about Adam. You're right. It's not. He opened his door. Come on, I have something to show you. They rode the elevator up in silence. Veronica's mind churned with questions she didn't know how to ask. When they entered the penthouse, Brian didn't head to the kitchen or the living room. He walked straight to a door at the end of the hallway, one she'd noticed yesterday but hadn't thought about, one that had a lock. Brian pulled a key from his pocket, held it for a moment, then unlocked the door and pushed it open. This is Lucia's room, he said quietly. Or it was. I haven't changed anything. Veronica stepped inside. The room was frozen in time. Pink walls, posters of boy bands from the early 2000s, a bookshelf full of young adult novels. The bed was made, stuffed animals arranged carefully across the pillows. On the desk sat a picture frame, a little girl with dark curls and Brian's gray eyes, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. She loved art, Brian said from the doorway. Wanted to be an animator. Disney, Pixar, the whole dream. I told her I'd pay for whatever school she wanted when she was older. She said, his voice cracked almost imperceptibly. She said she'd dedicate her first movie to me. Veronica's chest ached. She thought about the little girl who'd died waiting for someone to care, about the boy who'd become a man trying to fix every broken thing he found, about the impossibility of making up for one loss by saving everyone else. I'm sorry, she said. I told you. No pity. I'm not pitying you, Brian. I'm grieving with you. There's a difference. He looked at her sharply, but whatever he was about to say died when he saw her face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't offering empty platitudes. She was just present, witnessing, sharing the weight. Thank you, he said finally, for not making this harder than it is. Thank you for showing me. They stood there for another moment, in a room that held a childhood that never got to finish, surrounded by dreams that died too soon. Then Brian gently closed the door, locked it, pocketed the key. We have a dinner Wednesday night, he said, voice steady again. Charity gala, black tie. You'll need a dress. Okay. And Veronica? What Rosa said about this being temporary, she's right. 6 months. Then you're free. Don't forget that. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her alone in the hallway, staring at a locked door and wondering when exactly the arrangement had started to feel like something more. The dress was midnight blue, floor length, with a neckline that suggested elegance without demanding attention. Veronica stood in front of the bathroom mirror Wednesday evening, fastening diamond earrings she'd never be able to afford, and barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked like she belonged at charity galas. The woman underneath felt like an imposter counting down the hours until someone exposed her. You look beautiful. Brian's voice came from the bedroom doorway. He was already dressed, black tuxedo fitted perfectly, hair styled carefully back. He looked like old money and new danger, like the kind of man photographers followed and rivals feared. He looked like everything Veronica had never wanted and somehow ended up with anyway. You're sure about this? She asked, turning. About the dress? Yes. About you being ready? Also, yes. He held out his hand. Come on, car's waiting. The Drake Hotel's ballroom glittered with Chicago's elite. Old money in pearls, new money, in diamonds, politicians glad-handing donors, and everyone pretending the champagne was the good kind. Brian navigated it like he'd been born to it, shaking hands, making introductions, always keeping Veronica close with a hand on her lower back. She played her part, smiled at the right moments, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Let Brian introduce her as Veronica, my girlfriend, a dozen times without flinching. But 20 minutes in, something shifted. A man approached, 50s, silver, hair, expensive suit that somehow looked cheap on him. His eyes lingered on Veronica too long before meeting Brian's. DeLuca, didn't expect to see you here. Santini. Brian's voice cooled by several degrees. Likewise. Marco Santini. Veronica remembered the name from Brian's brief rundown in the car. Rival family, ambitious, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with leverage. And who's this? Santini's smile didn't reach his eyes. My girlfriend. Veronica Chen. Veronica, Marco Santini. Veronica extended her hand. Santini took it, held it a beat too long. Pleasure. Brian, I didn't realize you were seeing anyone. You've been so solitary lately. People change. Do they? Santini finally released her hand. Or do they just get better at pretending? He turned to Veronica. He tell you what he does for a living, sweetheart? He solves problems. Veronica kept her voice light. Same as everyone in this room, just more honestly. Santini's eyebrows rose. Brian's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her back. Smart girl, Santini said. Make sure he doesn't solve you into a corner you can't escape from. Men like Brian, he leaned in conspiratorially. They're very good at making people disappear when they're no longer useful. Marco. Brian's voice dropped to something dangerous. Walk away. Of course. Enjoy your evening. Santini nodded to Veronica, then melted back into the crowd. Brian exhaled slowly, tension, bleeding from his shoulders. I'm sorry, he's testing you, Veronica finished. Seeing if I'm real or just another strategy. Did I pass? With flying colors. He grabbed 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter, handed her one. But we should circulate. The more people who see us together, the faster this becomes real in their minds. They spent the next 2 hours working the room. Veronica met developers and judges, philanthropists, and people whose job titles Brian never quite explained. She smiled until her face hurt, made small talk about nothing, and slowly began to understand the game. Everything here was performance. The charity was real, but so was the networking, the power plays, the careful dance of alliances forming and dissolving over shrimp cocktail. Around 10 p.m., she escaped to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, pressed her forehead against the cool metal, and tried to remember how to breathe. This was too much, too fast. She'd gone from hiding in a bus station to standing in a ballroom on the arm of a man the city feared, and somewhere along the way she'd lost the plot. 6 months. Protection. Fresh start. That was the deal. So why did she keep noticing the way Brian's hand felt on her back? Why did his smile at Rosa's dinner table keep replaying in her mind? Why did the locked room with the little girl's toys feel like a secret she'd been entrusted with, instead of just information? Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, saw the name, and felt ice flood her veins. Adam. Enjoy the gala, Veronica. You look stunning in blue. It's always been your color. Her hands started shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. She stared at the message, trying to process it, trying to understand how he knew, how he found her, how he... The bathroom door opened. Heels clicked on tile. Veronica? You in here? A woman's voice. Older. Warm. Rosa. Veronica unlocked the stall, stepped out. Rosa took one look at her face and immediately understood. What happened? Veronica wordlessly showed her the phone. Rosa's expression darkened. He's here. I don't know. Maybe. Or he's having me followed. Or he... Veronica's breath hitched. I thought I was safe. Brian said I was safe. You are safe. Rosa took her hands, squeezed firmly. That man wants you afraid. Don't give him that. Brian's in the ballroom. We walk back together. You stay close to him, and we figure out how Hargrove got this information. Capiche? Veronica nodded. Let Rosa lead her back out. Through the crowd, straight to where Brian stood talking with a city alderman. He saw her face immediately, excused himself, pulled her aside. What's wrong? She showed him the message. Brian read it once, then again. Then his jaw set in a way that made him look genuinely terrifying. We're leaving. Now. Brian. He's either here or he's hired someone to watch you. Either way, this location is compromised. He was already moving, one hand on her elbow, navigating them through the crowd toward the exit. They made it to the lobby before someone blocked their path. Adam Hargrove looked exactly like his pictures. Tall, clean-cut, smile that belonged on campaign posters. But his eyes, His eyes were cold calculation dressed up as concern. "Veronica, thank God. I've been so worried." Brian stepped between them before Veronica could respond. "She doesn't want to talk to you." "And you are?" Adam's smile never wavered. "Brian DeLuca, her boyfriend, the man she's actually chosen to be with." Adam's gaze flicked to Veronica, then back to Brian. "Interesting. She's known you what? A week? 2? And she's already playing house? That's not like her. Veronica's more deliberate with her affections." "She's also standing right here," Veronica said, finding her voice. "And she's asking you to leave, Adam. We're done." "We're not done. We're taking a break because you're confused and scared and someone," his eyes locked on Brian, "is taking advantage of that." "I'm not taking advantage of anything." Brian's voice was dangerously calm. "I'm giving her something you never did. A choice. You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? You filed a false missing persons report. You've been calling her phone 70 times a day. You tracked her location to this event tonight despite her making it clear she wants no contact. That's not love, Hargrove. That's obsession." Adam's smile finally cracked. "And what you're doing is better? Sweeping in, playing hero, convincing her she needs protection from the man who actually loves her?" "The man who actually loved her would have let her go." Brian stepped closer. "So here's how this works. You leave. You stop calling, stop tracking, stop existing in her life. You do that. We all walk away clean. You don't?" His voice dropped. "I make it very difficult for you to practice law in Illinois, or anywhere else." "Is that a threat?" "It's a guarantee." For a moment, Veronica thought Adam might do something stupid. Throw a punch, make a scene, prove Brian right about the obsession. But Adam was smarter than that. He'd spent years learning how to win through patience, strategy, control. "Veronica," Adam said, ignoring Brian completely, "when you realize this is a mistake, and you will, I'll be waiting. I always wait for you." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Brian immediately pulled out his phone, sent a rapid text. "Car's here. Let's go." They drove home in silence. Brian stared out the window, jaw tight, clearly running scenarios. Veronica hugged herself, trying to stop shaking, trying to understand how Adam found her so quickly. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "Don't." Brian's voice was sharp. "Don't apologize for him. This isn't your fault. But I brought him to you, to your world. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. We made a deal. I protect you from him. He just showed me what I'm protecting you from." Brian finally looked at her. "Veronica, I've handled men a lot more dangerous than Adam Hargrove. He's a prosecutor who thinks the law makes him invincible. He's about to learn it doesn't. What are you going to do? Nothing illegal, nothing traceable. But by tomorrow morning, Adam's going to have enough professional problems that finding you will be the last thing on his mind. Brian, you asked me to keep him away. I'm keeping him away." He paused. "But you need to understand. Once I do this, there's no going back. He'll know you're with someone powerful, enough to hurt him. That changes the dynamic, makes him either back off completely or escalate dangerously. I need to know you trust me to handle whichever happens." Veronica looked at this man who'd shown her his dead sister's room, who'd introduced her to his family, who'd stood between her and Adam without hesitation. "I trust you," she said. Brian nodded slowly. "Okay. Then tomorrow we solve this problem." They pulled into the parking garage, rode the elevator up in continued silence, entered the penthouse. Veronica collapsed onto the couch, exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. Brian disappeared for a few minutes, returned with 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed her one, sat across from her. "You should know. he said quietly. I had someone look into Adam after you told me his name. Public records, court cases, professional history. He's good at his job. Conviction rate in the high 90s. But he's also been flagged internally twice for overzealous pursuit of defendants. Once involved a case where the evidence was questionable, but he pushed for maximum sentencing anyway. Guy served 8 years before DNA evidence exonerated him. Adam never apologized. Veronica sipped the whiskey. It burned. So, he's been like this before. With other people. He's been obsessive his entire career. You're just the first person he targeted personally. Brian leaned forward. Which means he's not going to stop because I threaten his job. He's going to stop because he realizes the cost of continuing is worse than losing you. What cost? That's what I'm figuring out. He drained his glass. Go to bed, Veronica. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. She stood, hesitated. Brian, thank you. For tonight. For not... I told you. You're under my protection. That's not negotiable. She nodded, started toward her room, then turned back. Can I ask you something? Always. Rosa said you haven't been in Lucia's room in 20 years. Why'd you show it to me? Brian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because you didn't ask me to. You didn't demand explanations or expect me to justify myself. You just existed beside me without requiring anything. He met her eyes. That's rare. People always want something from me. You just wanted to survive. I respect that. Veronica's throat tightened. For what it's worth, I think Lucia would be proud of who you became. Brian's expression cracked just for a second. Then he reassembled it, nodded once, and stood. Good night, Veronica. Good night. She went to her room, locked the door, and lay in the dark trying to reconcile the last 72 hours of her life. She'd run from a man who claimed to love her, but wanted to own her. She'd made a deal with a man who'd never promised love but offered something more valuable. Freedom. And somewhere in between, she'd started to wonder what would happen when the 6 months ended, and she had to choose whether to stay or go. But that was a problem for future Veronica. Tonight, she was just grateful to be alive, safe, and 42 stories away from the man who'd tried to take both. Adam's professional life began unraveling at 9 a.m. the next morning. Veronica learned about it over coffee, watching Brian scroll through his tablet with an expression that might have been satisfaction but looked like simple efficiency. Bar Association received an anonymous complaint about ethical violations in 3 of his cases, Brian said without looking up. Evidence tampering allegations. Not enough to disbar him, but enough to trigger an investigation. I made some calls. People who owed me favors. People who'd wanted to look into Hargrove's methods for years, but couldn't justify the resources. Now they can. He set the tablet down. He'll be dealing with internal reviews for the next 6 months. By the time he's clear, if he's clear, you'll be long gone, and he'll have learned that obsession is expensive. Veronica sipped her coffee. She should feel guilty. She didn't. What about the tracking? How'd he know where I was last night? Your phone. He probably installed monitoring software when you were together. Had his IT guy activate it remotely once he knew you were in Chicago. Brian slid a new phone across the counter. This one's clean. Your old number's disconnected. Give the new one only to people you actually trust. She picked up the phone. It was the newest iPhone, already configured with her contacts, the ones Brian must have deemed safe. Her mother, 2 friends from culinary school she hadn't spoken to in a year. Rosa's number, surprisingly. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. This is basic operational security. You want to stay hidden, you stay disciplined. He stood, grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. I have meetings until 3. There's food in the fridge, and Marcus downstairs knows you're free to come and go. Just text me when you leave the building. Brian? He paused at the door. What happens if Adam doesn't back off? If he decides you're a bigger threat and escalates? Then I make it clear escalation was a mistake. Brian's voice was flat, final. You're safe, Veronica. Stop worrying. He left. Veronica sat alone in the pristine kitchen, surrounded by luxury she hadn't earned, holding a phone that represented a fresh start she didn't deserve. For the first time since running, she let herself think past survival. Let herself wonder, what comes after safe? She spent the morning unpacking completely, actually hanging clothes in the closet, arranging her grandmother's recipe book on the nightstand, making the guest room feel less temporary. Then she called her mother. Veronica? Oh, thank God, I've been so worried. I'm okay, Mom. I'm safe. I'm sorry I couldn't call earlier. Her mother's voice cracked. Adam's been calling me, saying you had a breakdown, that you need help. I didn't believe him. But sweetheart, are you sure you're... I'm sure. I ended things with him. He didn't accept that. Now I'm somewhere he can't reach me. Veronica stared out at Lake Michigan, gray and restless under January clouds. I'm with someone who's keeping me safe. That's all you need to know. Someone? Veronica, you've been gone 3 weeks. I know it's fast. I know it sounds crazy. But Mom, I trust him. And that's more than I could ever say about Adam. Silence. Then, okay. I trust you. But promise me you'll be careful. That you'll call me every week so I know you're alive. I promise. They talked for another 20 minutes. Careful conversation that danced around specifics, anchored by the relief of hearing each other's voices. When Veronica hung up, she felt lighter, tethered, like maybe she hadn't completely lost herself in the running. Around 1, her new phone buzzed. Brian, how are you doing? Veronica, good, unpacked, called my mom, didn't leave the building. Brian, good. Dinner tonight? There's a place in West Loop and think you'd like. Veronica, just us? Brian, just us. Veronica stared at the message for a long moment. Just us meant no performance, no pretending. Which meant this wasn't business. This was Brian choosing to spend time with her when he didn't have to. Veronica, I'd like that. Brian, 7. Wear something comfortable. She spent the afternoon baking, asked Marcus the doorman where the nearest grocery store was, walked there with purpose, came back with ingredients and intent. By 5:30, the Znol kitchen smelled like butter and sugar and home. By 6, she'd produced 24 chocolate chip cookies, still warm, exactly how she used to make them at Sweet Endings. Brian walked in at 6:15, stopped in the doorway, and just stared. You baked. I needed to do something with my hands. Veronica slid the last tray out of the oven. Hope that's okay. It's... He crossed to the counter, picked up a cookie, bit into it, his eyes closed. These are perfect. They're just chocolate chip cookies. No, these are someone's childhood, someone's comfort, someone's... He trailed off, took another bite. My mom used to make these. I haven't had them in almost 30 years. Veronica's chest tightened. Then take as many as you want. I made them for you. Brian looked at her then, really looked, in a way that felt like being seen down to the foundation. Why? Because you've given me safety, and a place to breathe, and the first good night's sleep I've had in months. Cookies are a small thank you. Cookies are never small. He finished the first one, grabbed another. Give me 20 minutes to change, then we'll go eat food that won't be as good as these but costs 3 times as much. He disappeared down the hallway. Veronica packed half the cookies in a container for Rosa, left the rest on the counter, and tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the oven. The restaurant was intimate. Exposed brick, dim lighting, jazz playing. Low in the background. They sat at a corner table, away from windows, and for the first hour they talked about nothing. Food, Chicago neighborhoods, the difference between Boston winters and Midwest ones. Brian ordered wine she couldn't pronounce. Veronica ordered pasta she'd never heard of. They shared both, and somewhere between the second glass and dessert, the conversation shifted. "Can I ask you something?" Veronica said. "Depends what it is." "Rosa said you donate to children's charities. Millions, anonymously." "Why anonymously?" Brian swirled wine in his glass. "Because if people know where the money's coming from, they ask questions about where I got it. Better to just help and stay invisible." "But you want recognition. Everyone does." "I want Lucia back. Since I can't have that, I settle for making sure other kids don't die waiting for someone to care." He set his glass down. "Recognition doesn't bring her back. It just makes me feel less like I failed." Veronica reached, across the table, covered his hand with hers. "You were 19 years old, Brian. You did everything you could. Not enough. Maybe enough wasn't possible. Maybe you've spent 20 years punishing yourself for something you never had the power to fix." Brian stared at their joined hands. Didn't pull away. "You sound like Rosa." "Rosa's a smart woman. She likes you. That's dangerous." "Why?" "Because I like you too." He said it quietly, almost reluctantly, which wasn't part of the arrangement. Veronica's heart kicked against her ribs. No, it wasn't. "So we have a problem." "Do we?" Brian finally looked up, met her eyes. 6 months, Veronica. That's the deal. I keep you safe. You help me appear stable. We go our separate ways. Getting attached complicates things, I know. She pulled her hand back slowly. "But for what it's worth, I like you too. And that scares me more than Adam ever did." "Why?" "Because Adam's obsession looked like love until I saw it for what it was. What if I'm making the same mistake with you? What if this," she gestured between them, "is just gratitude dressed up as something more? How do I know the difference?" Brian leaned back, studying her. "You want the truth?" "Always." "You can't know. Not yet. Gratitude and affection look identical in the beginning. So we do what smart people do. We wait. We sit with it. And if it's still there after the crisis passes, after Adam's handled and you're not running anymore, then maybe it was real." He flagged down the waiter. "But tonight we're two people having dinner. Nothing more." "Nothing more," Veronica echoed. They finished dessert in lighter conversation, paid the bill, walked back to the car, drove home through streets that looked softer in the dark. And when they reached the penthouse and said goodnight in the hallway, Veronica almost asked him to stay. Almost said, "I don't want to be alone tonight." Almost closed the distance between them and found out if his mouth tasted like wine and honesty. Almost. Instead, she said, "Thank you for dinner." And he said, "Thank you for the cookies." And they went to their separate rooms like two people who'd made a deal and refused to break it, no matter how much they wanted to. 2 weeks passed in careful routine. Brian worked, Veronica baked, and they appeared together at exactly 3 events: a fundraiser, a business dinner, and Sunday brunch at Rosa's. Each time they played their parts perfectly. Each time the line between performance and reality blurred a little more. And each time, Adam stayed silent. "He's planning something," Brian said one morning over coffee. "Men like him don't back off quietly. They regroup and return worse." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He showed her his tablet, surveillance photos of Adam meeting with someone Veronica didn't recognize. Older man, expensive suit, the kind of face that belonged on corporate boards and crime documentaries in equal measure. "Who is that?" "Marco," Santini, the rival you met at the gala. Brian's jaw tightened. Adam's made a very stupid decision. He's trying to use Santini to get to me. Through you. What does that mean? It means the threat level just escalated. Santini's been looking for leverage against me for months. Adam just handed him a perfect target. Brian stood, started pacing. I need to move you. Move me where? Somewhere Adam and Santini can't track. Rose's place, maybe? Or a property I own outside the city? No. Veronica stood too, crossed to him. We made a deal. You keep me safe. I help you look stable. Running makes you look weak. Staying makes you vulnerable. Then make me less vulnerable. Teach me how to protect myself. Let me be part of this instead of something you're trying to hide. She grabbed his arm. Brian, I've spent 3 months being protected by a man who used it as control. Don't do the same thing for different reasons. He looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, nodded. Okay, but if this goes wrong, it won't. Because I trust you. And maybe... She squeezed his arm. You need to start trusting me, too. Brian's expression softened. I'm trying, Veronica. That's the terrifying part. I'm actually trying. That night, he taught her how to disappear in a crowd, how to spot a tail, how to use pepper spray without hesitating. And when she finally collapsed on the couch at midnight, exhausted but exhilarated, Brian sat beside her and said something that changed everything. You asked why I'm doing this. Why I care so much about keeping you safe when it's just a 6-month arrangement. He stared at his hands. The truth is, I don't know anymore. Somewhere between the elevator and now, you stopped being a strategy and started being someone I didn't want to lose. And that's not how this was supposed to work. Veronica's breath caught. Brian, I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm just being honest. Because you deserve that much. She reached over, took his hand. What if I told you I do feel the same way? That I stopped seeing this as temporary somewhere around the 3rd batch of cookies? Brian turned to her, eyes searching her face. Then I'd say we're both idiots who've made a business arrangement impossibly complicated. Yeah, Veronica smiled despite herself. We really are. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, shoulders touching, 2 people who'd started running and somehow found each other in the chaos. And when Brian finally stood to go to bed, he leaned down and kissed her forehead so gently, it felt like a promise. 6 months, he whispered. Let's survive it together. Then we'll figure out what comes next. Together, Veronica agreed. But neither of them knew that survival was about to get a lot more complicated. The text came at 3 a.m. 3 days later. Veronica woke to her phone buzzing, groggy and disoriented. She grabbed it, saw the unknown number, almost ignored it. Then she read the message. Unknown. He's coming for you tonight. Santini told Adam where you live. Get out now. A friend. She was out of bed before she'd fully processed the words, stumbling into the hallway, pounding on Brian's door. Brian, wake up. The door swung open. He stood there in sweatpants, no shirt, instantly alert. What's wrong? She shoved the phone at him. He read the message once, expression hardening into something lethal. Shit. He grabbed his own phone, started texting rapid fire. Marcus, get up here now. Full security protocol. No one gets past the lobby. Who sent this? Someone on the inside. Maybe one of Santini's people with a conscience. Maybe someone trying to start a war between us. Doesn't matter. If there's even a chance Adam's coming. He disappeared into his room, came back 30 seconds later, pulling on a shirt and shoulder holster. The gun underneath was matte black, efficient, terrifying. Veronica's mouth went dry. You're not going to... I'm not going to kill your ex unless he forces me to. But I'm also not letting him walk into my home and take you." He checked the gun's magazine, holstered it. "Pack a bag. Essentials only. We're leaving in 5 minutes." "Where are we going?" "Rosa's. It's the only place Adam doesn't know about and Santini can't touch." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, swore viciously. "Marcus says someone disabled the parking garage cameras 20 minutes ago. They're already here." The lights went out. Emergency. Lighting kicked in immediately. Dim, red, barely enough to see by. Brian grabbed Veronica's hand. "Bedroom, now." They ran. He pulled her inside, locked the door, then moved to the window. 42 stories down, the city glittered obliviously. Veronica's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Brian, what's happening?" "Santini's moving fast. Cut the power, disabled security. He's either coming up himself or sending people." Brian pulled out his phone, made a call. "Vince, 42nd floor, East Tower. I need extraction and I need it 10 minutes ago. I don't care what you're doing. Get here." "Yes, she's with me. 5 minutes." He hung up. "We're going to the roof." "The roof?" "Brian, there's no way down from—" "Helicopter. Vince is bringing one. But we have to get there first." He moved to the door, listened. Footsteps in the hallway. Multiple people, not trying to be quiet anymore. "Veronica." Brian's voice was perfectly calm. "Behind. Me. Don't make a sound. If someone grabs you, fight like your life depends on it. Because it does." He unlocked the door, eased it open. The hallway was empty, but Veronica could hear voices from the living room. Low, professional, coordinating. At least 3 people, maybe more. Brian moved like liquid shadow, hand on his gun, guiding her toward the emergency stairs. They were almost there when a man stepped out of the kitchen. Not Adam. Someone bigger, older, professional. He raised a gun. Brian moved faster, grabbed Veronica, spun, put himself between her and the weapon. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, but it hit the wall because Brian had already kicked the man's arm, disarming him in one fluid motion. The man went down hard. Brian grabbed the fallen gun, shoved it in Veronica's hands. "Hold this. Point it at anyone who isn't me." Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. "I can't." "You can. You will." He pulled her toward the stairs. "Move." They ran up, taking steps 2 at a time. Behind them, shouts. More footsteps. Someone radioing for backup. The stairwell seemed endless, the red emergency lighting making everything feel apocalyptic. "Almost there," Brian said. 3 more flights." They burst through the roof access door. January wind hit like a fist, brutal, freezing, sharp enough to steal breath. The roof was empty, snow-covered, 42 stories of nothing between them and the ground. No helicopter yet. "Vince, where are you?" Brian had his phone out, voice tight. 2 minutes? "I don't have 2 minutes. Fine. We'll hold." He pocketed the phone, positioned himself in front of the door. "Get behind the HVAC unit. Stay low." "Brian, do it." Veronica dove behind the massive unit. Seconds later, the door crashed open. 2 men came through, guns drawn. Brian fired first. Veronica had never heard gunshots this close. They weren't like movies. They were sharper, louder, more violent. They echoed off the surrounding buildings and left her ears ringing. One man went down. The other took cover behind a ventilation shaft, returning fire. Brian ducked, moved, fired again. Professional, efficient, terrifying. And then Adam appeared in the doorway. Not armed, just standing there in the freezing wind, looking at Veronica like she was something he'd lost and finally found. "Veronica, come home. This is insane. Don't—" Brian's voice was a warning. Don't talk to her. Or what? You'll shoot me? I'm not armed. I'm here for a conversation. That's all. You brought gunmen to my home. Brian kept his weapon trained on the remaining shooter. That's not a conversation. That's an act of war. I brought insurance, because I knew you'd never let me see her willingly. Adam took a step closer. Veronica, look at me. Please. She did. And for the first time, she saw him clearly. Not the prosecutor who'd promised protection, not the fiancé who'd made her feel special. Just a man so obsessed with winning he'd aligned with criminals and brought violence to someone else's doorstep. I'm not coming with you, Adam. You don't mean that. I do. You need to let me go. I can't. His voice cracked. I've tried, Veronica. I've tried to move on, to accept this. But I can't. You're supposed to be mine. We're supposed to... A helicopter rose over the building's edge, searchlight cutting through the darkness. Vince. Time's up, Brian said. He grabbed Veronica's hand, pulled her toward the landing. Zone. The second man tried to follow, but Brian fired a shot at his feet. Stay down, or the next one's center mass. The helicopter touched down, door sliding open. Vince, huge, scarred, terrifying, leaned out, offered his hand. Come on! Move! Brian lifted Veronica, practically threw her inside. She landed hard, Vince catching her, pulling her back. Brian climbed in after, and immediately the helicopter lifted. Through the open door, Veronica saw Adam standing on the roof, watching them, disappear into the Chicago night, expression unreadable. Then they were gone. They flew to Rosa's house, landed in a park 2 blocks away, ran through the pre-dawn darkness, and collapsed in her living room at 4:30 a.m. Rosa took one look at them, Brian bleeding from a cut on his cheek, Veronica still holding the gun with shaking hands, and immediately started giving orders. Marco, lock the doors. Veronica, sit. I'll get water. Brian, you're bleeding. I'm fine. You're bleeding. Sit. He sat. Rosa cleaned the cut, glass from a shattered window, while Veronica finally set the gun down and tried to stop shaking. What happened? Rosa demanded. Brian explained. Santini, Adam, the coordinated attack. When he finished, Rosa's expression was stone. That boy brought war to your home. He brought desperation. It's worse. Brian accepted the bandage, stood. We need to move Veronica again. Somewhere Adam can't possibly... No, Veronica said. Everyone turned. No more running. Brian, you were right. He's not going to stop because I hide. He's going to stop because the cost of continuing becomes too high. So we make it too high. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we go public. I tell my story. The stalking, the control, the obsession. We document everything. His calls, his tracking, tonight's attack. We make him the villain he actually is, and we do it so loudly he has no choice but to back off or destroy himself. Brian stared at her. That puts a target on your back. Permanently. I already have a target on my back. At least this way. I'm fighting back. She stood, walked to him. You've protected me for 3 weeks. Let me protect myself now, with your help. Rosa looked between them. The girl's right. Cockroaches scatter in the light. You shine a light on Hargrove. He either crawls away or gets crushed. Either way, he stops being your problem. Brian was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Okay, we do it your way. But we do it smart. Lawyers, press, everything documented and airtight. No room for him to spin this. Agreed. He pulled out his phone. I know people. Good people. Let me make some calls. While Brian coordinated, Veronica sat with Rosa in the kitchen. The old woman poured espresso, pushed a cup across the table. You love him, Rosa said, not a question. I don't know yet. You know. You just don't want to admit it because it's terrifying. Loving someone like Brian, someone dangerous, someone broken, means accepting you might lose him any day. Rosa sipped her own coffee. But here's what I learned in 47 years of marriage. Safety is an illusion. The only real choice is whether you love someone despite the danger, or whether you let fear keep you alone. And if I choose him? If this works, and Adam leaves and we actually have a chance? What then? Then you figure it out like everyone else. One day at a time, one mistake at a time. Until one day you wake up and realize you've built a life worth having. Rosa smiled. You're stronger than you think, Kara. You always have been. Brian returned an hour later, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. It's done. Press conference tomorrow at 3. Lawyers are drafting statements. We tell your story, show the evidence, and let public pressure do the rest. And if Adam retaliates? Then he proves every word you said and destroys himself. Brian sat down heavily. But it's your call, Veronica. Once we do this, there's no undoing it. Your name will be out there. People will know. Good. Let them know. Let everyone know what obsession looks like when it wears a suit and calls itself love. She stood, offered her hand. Let's finish this. Brian took her hand, held it for a moment longer than necessary, and for the first time since the elevator, Veronica felt like she wasn't running anymore. She was standing her ground. The press conference room at the downtown law office was smaller than Veronica expected, but packed. Reporters, cameras, microphones, every major Chicago outlet and several national ones. Brian stood beside her at the podium, not touching, but present. A wall. A witness. Veronica adjusted the microphone. Her hands were steady. She'd practiced this 100 times in Rosa's living room, but now, with lights in her face and recorders running, the words felt heavier. My name is Veronica Chen. 4 weeks ago, I left my fiancé, Adam Hargrove, because what I thought was love had become control. What I thought was protection had become surveillance. What I thought was commitment had become obsession. She paused. Let that settle. Today, I'm here to tell my story. Not for sympathy, but for every person who's ever felt trapped by someone who claimed to love them. She spent 15 minutes detailing it all. The tracking software on her phone, the false missing persons report, the calls to her mother, the way Adam showed up at the gala despite her explicit requests for no contact. She showed evidence, screenshots, recordings her lawyer had deemed admissible, testimony from friends who'd witnessed the deterioration. Then she talked about the attack. 3 nights ago, Adam Hargrove coordinated with organized crime figures to break into my current residence with armed men. His stated goal was to bring me home. The actual result was violence, property damage, and a clear message. He would rather see me hurt than see me free. The room erupted with questions. Brian stepped forward, voice calm and commanding over the chaos. Ms. Chen will not be taking questions at this time. However, we encourage anyone with information about Adam Hargrove's conduct, professionally or personally, to contact the tip line we've established. Thank you. They left through the back exit. Veronica collapsed in the car, adrenaline draining, leaving her hollow and shaking. You did good, Brian said quietly, starting the engine. I feel like I'm going to throw up. That's normal. You just declared war on a man who thinks he's untouchable. It's supposed to feel terrifying. He glanced at her. But you also just made it infinitely harder for him to touch you. Public scrutiny is its own protection. By evening, the story was everywhere. Cable news, social media, op-eds about prosecutorial abuse and the failures of restraining orders. Adam's office issued a terse no comment, which only made him look guiltier. And by morning, Adam Hargrove had been placed on administrative leave, pending a formal investigation into his conduct, both professional and personal. Veronica read the headline on Brian's tablet over breakfast, and for the first time in months, felt like she could breathe. "It's working," she said. "It's starting to work," Brian corrected. "Adam's not gone yet. Just wounded. Wounded animals are the most dangerous. Then we stay vigilant. We stay vigilant." 3 weeks later, Adam Hargrove's career effectively ended. The Bar Association investigation found multiple ethical violations spanning years. His conviction rate, it turned out, was built partially on evidence suppression and witness intimidation. 2 cases were overturned. A dozen more flagged for review. And Adam himself, facing potential disbarment, criminal charges, and complete professional ruin, did the only thing men like him ever did when they finally lost. He disappeared. No threats. No final confrontation. Just gone. Veronica learned about it from a brief email sent by his lawyer. "Mr. Hargrove has relocated out of state and will not be pursuing further contact. Please consider all matters resolved." She showed it to Brian in the penthouse kitchen. He read it twice, then set it down carefully. "How do you feel?" he asked. "I don't know. Relieved? Angry that it took this much to make him stop? Guilty that I destroyed his career?" "He destroyed his own career. You just turned on the lights." Brian poured them both coffee. "But I understand the guilt. Surviving. Something doesn't always feel like winning." "No, it doesn't." Veronica wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Brian leaned against the counter. "You figure out what you want. We're at week 7 of our 6-month arrangement. Adam's gone. You're safe. Technically, you could walk out that door and start over anywhere you wanted." Her chest tightened. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" "What I want," Brian said carefully, "is for you to choose for yourself. Not because you're grateful, not because you're scared, but because it's what you actually want. Even if that means leaving." Veronica set her cup down, crossed to him. "And if I told you I don't want to leave? That somewhere between cookies and rooftop gunfights, I stop seeing this as temporary? Then I'd say we've made things extremely complicated." But he was smiling slightly. "I'd also say I'm okay with complicated if you are." "I am. But Brian, you have to understand. I can't be someone you protect forever. I need to stand on my own. Build my own life. Not just exist in the margins of yours. I know. And I wouldn't want you to." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But maybe standing on your own doesn't mean standing alone. Maybe it just means having someone beside you who won't hold you back." "Is that what you're offering? A partnership? Not protection?" "I'm offering whatever you want it to be. 6 months, 6 years, 6 decades. As long as you're choosing it freely." Veronica kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated, just instinct and honesty and relief that she'd survived long enough to have this choice. Brian kissed her back, gentle at first, then deeper, like he'd been waiting months to do exactly this. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "So," Brian said, "what do you want, Veronica Chen?" "I want to reopen my bakery. Not sweet endings. Something new. Here in Chicago." She paused. "And I want to see where this goes with you. No 6-month deadline, no arrangements. Just us figuring it out." "That sounds terrifying and perfect." "Yeah, it really does." 6 months later, Veronica stood in front of a storefront in Wicker Park, keys in hand, staring at the sign above the door. "Second Rising, Artisan Bakery and Cafe." Brian stood beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee from the shop next door. "You ready?" he asked. "I'm terrified." "Good. That means it matters." He handed her a coffee. "But for what it's worth, I think you're going to be incredible." The bakery was everything Veronica had dreamed of. Exposed brick, vintage ovens, a display case she'd spent weeks filling with her grandmother's recipes and new creations. She'd hired 2 staff members, secured a small business loan, and spent every waking hour for months building something that was entirely hers. Brian had helped: connections for contractors, advice on business structures, silent support when she'd had panic attacks about failure. But he'd never tried to take over, never made her feel small. He'd just been there. Steady. Present. They opened the door together. The space smelled like fresh paint and possibility. "You know what Rosa told me last week?" Veronica said, walking through her new bakery, trailing her fingers over counters she'd designed herself. "What?" "She said you smile more now, that you've stopped carrying your grief like a weapon." Veronica turned to face him. "Is that true?" Brian considered that. "Maybe. I think, for a long time, I thought keeping people at a distance was the same as being strong. That if I didn't let anyone close, I couldn't fail them the way I failed Lucia. But you," he moved closer, "you showed me that strength isn't about being alone. It's about letting someone see you completely and trusting they'll stay anyway." "I'm staying," Veronica said, "for the record." "Good. Because I'm pretty invested in watching you build an empire out of flour and sugar." She laughed, kissed him, then pulled back. "Help me finish setting up? We open tomorrow and I still have 80 croissants to bake. I'll help on one condition." "What?" "You make tiramisu, the way your grandmother taught you. I want to see if it's as good as my mother's." Veronica's throat tightened. She thought about Juliana De Luca, who died too young. About Lucia, who never got the chance to grow up. About all the people they'd both lost and carried with them like invisible weight. "I'll make tiramisu," she said, "and we'll eat it together and decide whose family recipe wins." "Deal." They spent the rest of the evening baking. Brian proved surprisingly competent at following directions, and by midnight, the display cases were full. Croissants, cookies, custom cakes waiting for orders. Second rising was ready. Veronica locked the door, turned off the lights, and stood with Brian on the sidewalk outside, looking at her bakery through the window. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not saving me. For letting me save myself and just being there while I did." Brian wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You know what? I think we saved each other." And standing there in the February cold, watching snowflakes dust the windows of a bakery built from survival and choice, and something deeper than either of them knew how to name yet, Veronica thought maybe he was right. Epilogue. 1 year later, Second Rising had lines out the door most mornings. Veronica hired 3 more staff, expanded the menu, started catering events. She was exhausted, exhilarated, exactly where she wanted to be. Brian proposed on the anniversary of the day they met. Not in the bakery, not at a fancy restaurant, but in the penthouse elevator. The same elevator where Veronica had first asked a dangerous stranger for help, and somehow found home instead. "I don't have a speech prepared," he said, kneeling in that cramped space between floors. "But I know that a year ago, this elevator broke down and gave me the greatest gift I didn't know I needed. You. So Veronica Chen, will you marry me? Not because you need protection, not because we made a deal, but because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life watching you build beautiful things?" She said yes before he finished asking. The wedding was small. Rosa and Marco, Veronica's mother, a handful of Brian's closest associates, and the staff from Second Rising. They got married at City Hall on a Thursday morning, then had cake and champagne at the bakery. It wasn't the wedding Veronica had once planned with Adam. No grand gesture, no photographers, no performance. It was better. It was real. And when Brian carried her across the threshold of the penthouse that night, both of them laughing and covered in frosting from the impromptu cake fight Rosa had started, Veronica thought, "This is what love looks like when it's not trying to cage you." "Hey," Brian said, setting her down in the living room. "I have something for you." He disappeared down the hallway, came back with a key. "What's this?" "Lucia's room. I'm giving it to you. Not to change if you don't want to, but you're family now, and family doesn't get locked out." Veronica took the key, turned it over in her palm. "What should I do with it?" "Whatever feels right. Turn it into an office, a guest room, a space for memories. I trust you." She walked down the hallway, unlocked the door, stepped inside. The room looked exactly as it had a year ago. Frozen, preserved, a shrine to grief. But now Veronica understood what Brian had been trying to tell her that first night. This wasn't a room. It was a promise, a reminder, a reason. She closed the door gently, returned to the living room where Brian waited. "I think," she said, "we should turn it into a nursery. When we're ready, give the space a new story." Brian's eyes widened. "Are you?" "Not yet, but someday, if you want that." "I want that," he said quietly. "I want everything with you." They stood there in the apartment where Veronica had once been a guest, where she'd learned to stop running, where she'd built a life from the ruins of an old one. And she thought, survival is just the beginning. What comes after? The choosing, the building, the loving someone despite all the reasons not to. That's the real story. "Brian? Yeah? Thank you for opening the elevator door. I know you didn't have to." He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "Yes, I did. Because sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. They're just the ones who show up when it matters and refuse to look away." "That's beautiful. You should write that down." "Nah. I'll just spend the rest of my life proving it instead." And he did. Sometimes the person who saves you is the last one you'd expect. Sometimes it's the man the world taught you to fear. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they're the person who teaches you that love isn't about control or possession or perfect safety. It's about choosing someone every single day, despite the danger, despite the fear, despite all the reasons to run. It's about opening the door when someone knocks, even if you're the most dangerous person in the room. Because everyone, even a man who built an empire on control, even a woman who spent months running, deserves the chance to be seen, chosen, and loved without conditions. That's not a fairy tale. That's just what happens when two people brave enough to be broken decide to be whole together.